6
love
seconds.
you, bitch.
What's the... Alright, we're about to see the prompt. Let's go 2 seconds. 1 second. Starts in. Hold on. Oh, I gotta refresh the page. Oh no, they didn't say it. What if I just submitted a project? It's just like a picture, like a little drawing of like a stegosaurus on a skateboard. With, like sunglasses. Hell yeah, that's my game. Hope you like it.
Bonk.
What's up, girls, boys, and non-binary joys? It's me, the person who lives under your bed. Shh, don't tell anyone. I wanted to share something with you. As some of you may know, I participated in my first game jam ever, Chill Jam 8 actually. It was super fun, and I learned so dang much from the experience. The people who ran the jam and all who took part in it were incredibly lovely, and super skilled and talented at what they do. I was very excited, but as you can imagine, I was also very nervous. For the longest time, I kept myself from ever participating in game jams. I often told myself, oh, I need to finish at least one game first, just to prove that I could do it. My friend Punkbold actually often told me that I should totally do a game jam, and I would often reply with that same mantra of, maybe someday, let me see if I can even complete a game first. Well, one day I realized, I kept saying just to prove that I could do it, but I never really knew who I was trying to prove that to. Me? The people I shared works in progress with? The whole internet? The line of thinking ended up resulting in a sort of paradigm shift, where I said to myself, maybe I should do it. This looks like it could be really fun. Maybe it will help me develop some skills about actually finishing games that I still have yet to conquer. And God, was I right. To name a few things I learned, I learned about mesh baking, I learned about light baking, I learned a ton about occlusion culling, and I learned so much about GPU instancing and optimizing textures and draw calls, how to make a randomized, quest system with the deliveries, how to do proper grayboxing and level design, and then how to even turn said graybox into an actual level. There was so much to do and so much that went into it, and I learned it. I did it. It was, for so long, my white whale. And by God, that's just the surface of what I learned and what I'm now able to do, or at least feel comfortable doing. And I wouldn't have learned any of it if I had decided one day on April 19th that I should try out this funny little jam I found. And that would be Chill Jam 8. And for that, I am very grateful to those who helped facilitate such a fun and lucrative experience, because, God, this is probably one of the best experiences in game dev I've had ever. And I'm excited to do it again. I mean, I'm going to give myself a break first, because making a game in 2 weeks, as you can imagine, was quite hard and quite stressful. But I'm excited to do a game jam again. And for that, I have Chill Jam number 8 to thank. And that is very exciting. But that's more or less the history of how I got here. Let's actually talk about the game. Once I saw the spring theme, I decided to try and make a flower delivery game. Then, once I saw the additional theme of Out of Time, I thought, perfect, I can totally just make this a time trial. And I did. Well, sort of. We'll get to that. It was around the same time that I also went through my library of assets I've accumulated over the past year or so. And I remembered a while back that the Humble Bundle store had a Cincy bundle up for super cheap that I snagged. Inside of it was this pack called the Ancient Empire pack, which was very Greek themed and perfect for what I was going for. I used that in ProBuilder to make a lot of the final level, actually. A very powerful combination. And hey, let's talk about that delivery system for a little bit. I actually spent the first day building the framework for what would become the delivery system by using, at first, an array, but then I moved on to lists, and that's another thing I learned. I learned a lot about lists. This is dumbing it down, but the code itself isn't really that complex to begin with. I had a list of characters and a list of spawn points, and I randomized the enum that contained all of the data for what types of flowers there were, so that they'd require a different delivery each time you played the game, and the order that they appeared in would also be different, and the location. Once a character was placed at a spawn point where the game starts, they would be taken from a randomized list and moved to the back, and it would go down the line until no points or no characters were left. This resulted in a completely procedural level each time you played. No delivery was the same. The flower system was also very fun. I knew early on that I wanted a trail of petals to follow you as you hop, skip, and jump around. It was one of the first things I implemented using a particle system, and it only activates when you're actually carrying flowers, so it's fun, and it's also light on performance. Another thing I decided very early on was that I didn't want fall damage. I felt it detracted from the chillness of the game, but also the game just felt more satisfying when you didn't have to worry about crunching your ankles in your butt every time you had a hard fall. Not only did this alleviate a lot of work from me, but it resulted in a much better game feel. However, the thing I spent the most amount of time on would probably be the level. I mentioned I learned a lot of things like reducing draw calls by mesh and texture baking, GPU instancing, and compressing and the like. I did, but I still had a weird instance of 2 big FPS drops when looking over the whole city. Even in just a few areas, it seemed like the FPS was tanking quite a bit. I'm a bit embarrassed to admit it took me a few days to figure out that just because a mesh is baked together doesn't quite mean that it's optimized. 2 large objects, props inside included, that I mesh baked together were the market and the Parthenon. These were the direct cause of a large FPS drop. And when looking over the city, and even just over the areas in general, you would see FPSs of like 10 or 12. Very low, very unperformant. And the reason this was unperformant was because when occlusion culling, it counted it all as one object, one mesh. So even if you only saw a little sliver of the actual Parthenon or the actual market, it would be forced to render the entire thing. And for some reason I didn't take that into consideration. It feels like something that is quite obvious in hindsight. Now you may be asking, Audrey, Pop-Tart, honey, you knew the game would have to render every mesh inside if you bake these together, so why'd you go ahead and do that, you diggity-dong dingus? And that's a great question. And the answer is actually quite simple. I don't know. So what I ended up doing was re-importing the prefabs and just being smarter about how I baked them. And thank goodness I actually saved these prefabs, because if I had to remake and re-import all of these assets and materials and models again, I would probably join ISIS. Speaking of Teister baking though, that kind of leads into my next point of what I think I messed up during Flowers of Arcadia, is that a lot of the buildings have very awkward colliders, especially when it comes to wall running and climbing. You see, when you bake the meshes, I also made the mistake of deleting the source objects that I was baking. This resulted in me having to use mesh colliders instead of the colliders that were already there, which were very much awkward to wall run and climb because they were uneven. They weren't smooth like box colliders. The geometry just wasn't smooth. It didn't facilitate that kind of thing. And I remedied this somewhat by using box colliders on as many walls and ridge surfaces as I could, but by this point the damage was already done. I am excited to use this knowledge in the future though, as I definitely don't intend on making the same mistake twice, and hopefully in the future the wall running is much smoother and much more responsive. Ziplines are something I knew I wanted to have as well, and I did this using an asset called Dewtween. It's probably my favorite asset on the Unity store, and it's free. It offers so much simple and effective code functionality that has so many different applications. Here I use transform.doMove on the transform to zip from one point to another in a certain amount of time. Neat! I mentioned I put in a time trial earlier, and I sort of did that. I put in a timer that counts up and times you specifically on how well you did. Though it technically does save it to the player preps, it doesn't really display that information anywhere. It's more run specific. That's something that I wish that I had more time to implement fully. However, I am glad that I was able to implement a timer in some way, shape, or form. The timer stops whenever you're discussing dialogue with people or on a pause menu, obviously. Anything that may disrupt the flow of the game, it's paused. So it only runs when you're actually running around, which I think is very helpful and very handy so that you don't actually dock any points by having to, say, speak to somebody with dialogue. Now, the music system was something I was very excited about implementing. The way it works is that it plays a baseline 75 BPM drum beat, and depending on the flowers that you pick up, it'll play a different 75 BPM loop over that, and it'll sync up perfectly. There's an audio source for each loop and each drum beat, of course, and I just fade in and fade out the volume using Dewtween as needed. That's a very good system to use, and I would highly recommend going about that route. I don't know how performant it is, so if it's not performant, then I don't know. Screw me, I guess. But there's always a better way to do something, so either way, it was a good start, and I quite enjoyed it. It was fun. And the pedestrian system was even more fun. where I took all the Cincy characters and I randomized them and placed them at a separate spawn point with the same sort of logic that I used for the delivery system. And they randomized their animations with the same animator controller and just kind of alternate between those. And it's been a lot of fun, and it added such a nice depth and life to the city, so you're not running around this barren liminal wasteland. It was actually quite last minute as well, and I'm glad I got it in. I also made a sort of Easter egg system where there are these crystals scattered around, and if you find all 3 of them, well, a secret happens. I won't spoil it here, but if you can find them, hey, congratulations. At the end, through all the trials and roadblocks I had to face, I am quite proud of the game I ended up making. Not only because I am pleased with the quality of it, but I am also very proud of how much I learned, and how much I was able to apply on my own. And more than anything, I am just so proud that I was able to finally, after almost a year of teaching myself coding and game dev, able to complete a project. This was the whole reason I joined the jam, really. I wanted to be able to say I completed something, to have something under my belt to say that it's mine, and I made it. I learned a lot about discipline and working with deadlines. Nipping scope creep in the butt and keeping things simple and effective in terms of both code, gameplay, design, and more were also pivotal in this. I also want to extend a huge thank you to those who helped run the jam, and a sincere congratulations to all those who submitted amazing entries. I spent a good portion of time the other day playing through them, and seeing the creativity of so many people really was something wonderful. There are a lot of really good entries, and game dev is hard. And the fact that we were able to complete it, to make things anyway, like, that's a huge thing to be proud of, I think. It's not easy, and it's a miracle if you ask me that games are made at all. And it's just a wonderful experience, and I'm so glad I got to share it with everyone. So thank you. My name is Audrey from Earth, and thank you for hanging out with me. I hope you have a good reason to smile today, and take care.